what we are doing right now is we are restreaming right now. We are restreaming over to Twitch and to YouTube. I don't normally do that, but given the status of the world right now, there's probably a few more people looking for a bit of distraction, and that is what I am aiming to do by restreaming over there. Our mainstream, if you're watching over there, is over here on Mixer, mixer.com/CarringtonTV. But my book club stuff, I'm restreaming. Hopefully you find it entertaining. I'm not restreaming the gaming stuff because yeah, no one needs to see that. I was too busy gaming, says Skip Donahue. No, I wish. Shadowtronic says, just a message to remind everyone that we have members here who have been affected. We ask that we send them prayers, good thoughts, well wishes through this crazy time, and let us do all our part to fight this. Stay safe. Yes. It's a crazy time. It's a crazy time, and we need to yeah, be cautious with when we're going out and about if we need to, and hopefully the states can all get coordinated and yeah. All right. So what are we reading? We're reading Whose Body by Dorothy L. Sayers. It's one of her very first murder mystery novels, and luckily in the public domain, because that's all we do around here, read stuff in the public domain. Have a good time with that. We started this on Monday, got off to a pretty good start. Lord Peter Wimsey is a bit of an interesting character there. Him and his butler, a sidekick. He's done a couple of things. I don't think the book is supposed to be taken so seriously. He's done a few things. Well, I mean, there's been lots of comedic moments in it, but in particular, you had Lord Peter Wimsey like looking into the mirror and comparing himself to Sherlock Holmes. So I guess he's kind of I don't know. This might have been one of those books inspired by the success of others. Yeah, comparing himself to Sherlock Holmes, and then there was a breaking the fourth wall moment in it there, where I forget exactly how it went, but Lord Peter Wimsey, he was talking to his butler, I think it was. Or maybe it was the inspector. Yeah, he makes a comment, like, oh, this is very serious. It's not like we're detectives in a novel or something like that. So yeah, he's yeah, okay, right. It's a pretty light detective almost comedy, but we shall see. Let's see. Just catching up on Twitter real fast. Oh, we have a new we have a new sticker. We have a new sticker today. Yes, we do. I think it's going to be changed though. This is what it looks like. Yeah. That's what right there. I think I might change the text though. That's another Jer Henning sticker. Very nice. He is a very whimsical chap. I think what I'll do is I might change the text on that. I mean, you don't see that one. You don't see it on the list? You might have to refresh. But I think what I might do is change the text in that, just so it says hype. Yeah, so, yeah. There we go. Yeah, there we go. The old book club sticker, book club hype. Yeah, so maybe get rid of the thing that says book club, because we already kind of have a book club. But that was kind of cool too, actually. That one that was kind of growing on me. Yeah, but that's pretty awesome, right? Yeah, yeah, I like that. Jerry Henningsen. Yeah, you know what? Maybe it's time to retire the old book club sticker then. I don't know. Don't know. Don't know. Yes, 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 yes. Well, I mean, yeah, you know, I'm still a spring chicken. Still a spring chicken. All right, but I don't know. We'll figure that out. Anyway, we should probably get on with it because it is a quarter past. It's a quarter past. We should be reading some stuff. Let's do it. Let's get on. Let's get on into it. Wow, there's several artists on the Mixer thing right now. Okay, let's do it. Where's my main book screen? Here it is. Where's my book? Why is it not showing up? There we go. Okay, all right. It wasn't active. Okay. Let's move this on over so I can check on that. Let's move this over so I can look at the, there you go, chat window. No, I don't think Thug Life is, I don't think that would be representative of this channel. Alrighty. And you got 50 stickers. What? Alright. Okay, let's back up a page. So that's right. So they're staying with his mother now. They're staying with Lord Peter Wimsey's mother. Why were they there? Probably because she lives close by. Probably. I've forgotten exactly. That's right. So that, yeah, they don't know who the murdered person is, which I guess is that's kind of the implied in the title, whose body. But yeah, some of the people think it is Mr. Levy, a financier, like a fat cat money man, who had a big old bushy beard. However, the body, when they found it, did not have a big old bushy beard, though it was later discovered that the beard had been shaved off after the body had been killed. But they still can't positively identify it, because the wife of the maybe murdered man is out of the country, and it's no one else. I don't know how you could be like a big important money man and not have a few more friends to be able to come in and identify you, but here we are. You think it is the finance guy? Well, no, they suspect it might be, but there's also a lot of doubt around it too. So, okay, Shadowtronics thinks it is. It is for sure. All right. Don't know. Don't know. Okay, here we go. And thank you for the host there, Mr. Donahue. Okay. Chapter 4. So there it is, Parker, said Lord Peter, pushing his coffee cup aside and lighting his after-breakfast pipe. You may find it leads you to something, though it don't seem to get me any further with my bathroom problem. Did you do anything more at that after I left? No, but I've been on the roof this morning. The deuce you have. What an energetic devil you are. I say, Parker, I think this cooperative scheme is an uncommonly good one. It's much easier to work on someone else's job than one's own. Gives one that delightful feeling of interfering and bossing about, combined with the glorious sensation that another fellow has taken all one's own work off one's hands. You scratch my back and I'll scratch yours, what? Did you find anything? Not very much. I looked for any footmarks, of course, but naturally, with all this rain, there wasn't a sign. Of course, if this were a detective story, there'd be a convenient shower exactly an hour before the crime, and a beautiful set of marks which could only have come there between 2 and 3 in the morning. But this being real life in a London November, you might as well expect footprints in Niagara. I searched the roofs right along, and came to the jolly conclusion that any person in any blessed flat in the blessed row might have done it. All the staircases open onto the roof, and the leads are quite flat. You can walk along as easy as along Shaftesbury Avenue. Still, I've got some evidence that the body did walk along there. See, that's another one of these bits there where he's saying, if this were a detective story, this is like the second time they've broken the fourth wall there. Often get that happening in books, I guess. What's up there, Hot Wheels Skid? It's been a while, man. How you doing? Mr. Broke Toad is here as well. Yeah, oh yeah, £200 a year for the... Oh, you think the butler did it? What? Yeah, he ain't being paid well, that's for sure. Still, I've got some evidence that the body did walk along there. What's that? Parker brought out his pocketbook and extracted a few shreds of material which he laid before his friend. One was caught in the gutter just above Thip's bathroom window, another in a crack of the stone parapet just over it, and the rest came from the chimney stack behind, where they had caught in an iron stanchion. What do you make of them? Lord Peter scrutinized them very carefully through his lens. Interesting, he said. Damned interesting. Have you developed those plates, Bunter? He added, as that discreet assistant came in with the post. Yes, my lord. Oh, who's he talking to here? Hang on. Oh, Parker's the detective. Okay, Parker's the detective. No, okay, right. Okay. Blah, 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 blah. Okay. Have you developed those plates, Bunter? He added, as that discreet assistant came in with the post. Yes, my lord. Caught anything? I don't know whether to call it anything or not, my lord, said Bunter, dubiously. I'll bring the prince in. Do, said Whimsy. Hello, oh, here's our advertisement about the gold chain in the Times. Very nice it looks. Write, phone, or call 110 Piccadilly. Perhaps it would have been safer to put a box number, though I always think that the franker you are with people, the more likely you are to deceive them. So unused is the modern world to the open hand and the guileless heart, what? But you don't think the fellow who left that chain on the body is going to give himself away by coming here and inquiring about it? I don't, fathead, said Lord Peter, with the easy politeness of the real aristocracy. That's why I've tried to get hold of the jeweler who originally sold the chain. See? He pointed to the paragraph. It's not an old chain, hardly worn at all. Oh, thanks, Bunter. Now, see here, Parker, these are the finger marks you noticed yesterday on the window sash and on the far side of the bath. I'd overlooked them. I give you full credit for the discovery. I crawl, I grovel, my name is Watson, and you need not say what you were just going to say, because I admit it all. Now we shall... Hello? Okay, there's another Sherlock Holmes reference in there. They're definitely doing that. The three men stared at the photographs. The criminal, said Lord Peter bitterly, climbed over the roofs in the wet and not unnaturally got soot on his fingers. He arranged the body in the bath and wiped away all traces of himself except two, which he obligingly left to show us how to do our job. We learn from a smudge on the floor that he wore India rubber boots, and from this admirable set of fingerprints on the edge of the bath that he had the usual number of fingers and wore rubber gloves. That's the kind of man he is. Take the fool away, gentlemen. He put the prints aside and returned to an examination of the shreds of material in his hand. Suddenly he whistled softly. Do you make anything of these, Parker? They seem to me to be ravelings of some coarse cotton stuff, a sheet, perhaps, or an improvised rope. Yes, said Lord Peter, yes, it may be a mistake. It may be our mistake. I wonder. Tell me, do you think these tiny threads are long enough and strong enough to hang a man? He was silent, his long eyes narrowing into slits behind the smoke of his pipe. What do you suggest doing this morning? Asked Parker. Well, said Lord Peter, it seems to me it's about time I took a hand in your job. Let's go round to Park Lane and see what larks Sir Reuben Levy was up to in bed last night. That is the suspected murder victim. And now, Mrs. Pemming, if you would be so kind as to give me a blanket. said Mr. Bunter, coming down into the kitchen. Bunter's the butler, yeah. "And permit of me hanging a sheet across the lower part of this window, and drawing the screen across here, so as to shut off any reflections, if you understand me. We'll get to work." Sir Reuben Levy's cook, with her eye upon Mr. Bunter's gentlemanly and well-tailored appearance, hastened to produce what was necessary. Her visitor placed on the table a basket containing a water bottle, a silver-backed hairbrush, a pair of boots, a small roll of linoleum, and the letters of a self-made merchant to his son, bound in polished morocco. He drew an umbrella from beneath his arm and added it to the collection. He then advanced a ponderous photographic machine and set it up in the neighborhood of the kitchen range, then, spreading a newspaper over the fair, scrubbed surface of the table. He began to roll up his sleeves and insinuate himself into a pair of surgical gloves. Sir Reuben Levy's valet, entering at the moment and finding him thus engaged, put aside the kitchen-maid, who was staring from a front-row position, and inspected the apparatus critically. Mr. Bunter nodded brightly to him, and uncorked a small bottle of grey powder. "Odd sort of fish your employer, isn't he?" said the valet carelessly. "Very singular indeed," said Mr. Bunter. "Now, my dear," he added, ingratiatingly to the kitchen-maid, "I wonder if you'd just pour a little of this grey powder over the edge of the bottle while I'm holding it, and the same with this boot. Here at the top. Thank you, miss. What is your name?" "Price." "Oh, but you've got another name besides Price, haven't you?" "Mabel. That's a name I'm uncommonly partial to. That's very nicely done. You've a steady hand, Miss Mabel. See that? That's the finger marks, 3 here and 2 here, and smudged over in both places. No, don't you touch 'em, my dear, or you'll rub the bloom off. We'll stand 'em up here till they're ready to have their portraits taken. Now then, let's take the hairbrush next. Perhaps, Mrs. Pemming, you'd like to lift him up very carefully by the bristles." "By the bristles, Mr. Bunter?" "If you please, Mrs. Pemming, and lay him here. Now, Miss Mabel, another little exhibition of your skill, if you please. No, we'll try lamp black this time. Perfect. Couldn't have done it better myself. Ah, there's a beautiful set. No smudges this time. That'll interest his lordship. Now, the little book. No, I'll pick that up myself. With these gloves, you see, and by the edges. I'm a careful criminal, Mrs. Pemming. I don't want to leave any traces. Dust the corner all over, Miss Mabel. Now this side. That's the way to do it. Lots of prints and no smudges. All according to plan. Oh, please, Mr. Graves, you mustn't touch it. It's as much as my place is worth to have it touched." "Do you have to do much of this sort of thing?" inquired Mr. Graves from a superior standpoint. "Any amount," replied Mr. Bunter, with a groan calculated to appeal to Mr. Graves' heart and unlock his confidence. "If you'd kindly hold one end of this bit of linoleum, Mrs. Pemming, I'll hold up this end while Miss Mabel operates. Yes, Mr. Graves, it's a hard life, valeting by day and developing by night, morning tea at any time from 6:30 to 11, and criminal investigation at all hours. It's wonderful, the ideas these rich men with nothing to do get into their heads." "I wonder you stand it," said Mr. Graves. "Now, there's none of that here. A quiet, orderly, domestic life, Mr. Bunter, has much to be said for it. Meals at regular hours, decent, respectable families to dinner, none of your painted women, and no valeting at night. There's much to be said for it. I don't hold with Hebrews as a rule, Mr. Bunter, and of course I understand that you may find to your advantage to be an entitled family, but there's less thought of that these days. And I will say, for a self-made man, no one could call Sir Reuben vulgar, and my lady, at any rate, is county. Miss Ford she was, one of the Hampshire Fords, and both of them always most considerate. Man, wow, they really, okay. I agree with you, Mr. Graves. His lordship and me have never held with being narrow-minded. Why, yes, my dear, of course it's a footmark. This is the washstand linoleum. A good Jew can be a good man. That's what I've always said. And regular hours and considerate habits have a great deal to recommend them. Very simple in his taste now, Sir Reuben, isn't he? For such a rich man, I mean. Yeah, they keep harping on about that, good Lord. Very simple indeed, said the cook. The meals he and her ladyship have when they're by themselves with Miss Rachel. Well, there now, if it wasn't for the dinners, which is always good when there's company, I'd be wasting my talents in education here, if you understand me, Mr. Bunter. It is. Mr. Bunter added the handle of the umbrella to his collection and began to pin a sheet across the window, aided by the housemaid. Admirable, said he. Now, if I might have this blanket on the table, and another on a towel horse or something of that kind, by way of a background. You're very kind, Mrs. Pemming. I wish his lordship never wanted valeting at night. Many's the time I've sat up till 3 and 4, and up again to call him early to go off Sherlocking at the other end of the country, and the mud he gets on his clothes and boots. I'm sure it's a shame, Mr. Bunter, said Mrs. Pemming warmly. Lo, I calls it. In my opinion, police work ain't no fit occupation for a gentleman, let alone a lordship. Everything made so difficult, too, said Mr. Bunter, nobly, sacrificing his employer's character and his own feelings in a good cause. Boots chucked into a corner, clothes hung upon the floor, as they say. It's often the case with these men, as they're born with a silver spoon in their mouths, said Mr. Graves. Now, Sir Reuben, he's never lost his good old-fashioned habits. Clothes folded up neat, boots put out in his dressing-room, so as a man could get them in the morning. Everything made easy. He forgot them the night before last, though. The clothes, not the boots. Always thoughtful for others, as Sir Reuben. I hope nothing's happened to him. Indeed, no, poor gentleman, chimed in the cook. And as for what they're saying, that he'd have gone out surreptitious-like to do something he didn't ought, well, I'd never believe it of him, Mr. Bunter, not if I was to take my dying oath upon it. Ah, said Mr. Bunter, adjusting his arc lamps and connecting them with the nearest electric light. And there's more than most of us could say as pays us. 5'10", said Lord Peter, and not an inch more. He peered dubiously at the depression in the bedclothes and measured it a second time with the gentleman's scout's vademecum. Parker entered this particular in a neat pocketbook. I suppose, he said. Oh. I suppose, he said, a 6'2" man might leave a 5'10" depression if he curled himself up. Have you any Scotch blood in you, Parker? Inquired his colleague bitterly. Not that I know of, replied Parker. Why? Because of all the cautious, ungenerous, deliberate, and cold-blooded devils I know, said Lord Peter, you are the most cautious, ungenerous, deliberate, and cold-blooded. Here am I, sweating my brains out to introduce a really sensational incident into your dull and disreputable little police investigation, and you refuse to show a single spark of enthusiasm. This is Parker. Well, it's no good jumping at conclusions. Jump? You don't even crawl distantly within sight of a conclusion. I believe if you caught the cat with her head in the cream jug, you'd say it was conceivable that the jug was empty when she got there. Well, it would be conceivable, wouldn't it? Curse you, said Lord Peter. He screwed his monocle into his eye and bent over the pillow, breathing hard and tightly through his nose. Here, give me the tweezers, he said presently. Good heavens, man, don't blow like that. You might be a whale. He nipped up an almost invisible object from the linen. What is it? Asked Peter. It's a hair, said Whimsy grimly, his hard eyes growing harder. Let's go and look at Levy's hat, shall we? And you might just ring for that fellow with the churchyard name. Do you mind? Mr. Graves, when summoned, found Lord Peter Wimsey squatting on the floor of the dressing-room before a row of hats arranged upside down before him. "Here you are," said that nobleman cheerfully. Here you are," said that nobleman cheerfully. "Now, Graves, this is a guessing competition, a sort of 3-hat trick, to mix metaphors. Here are 9 hats, including 3 top hats. Do you identify all these hats as belonging to Sir Reuben Levy? You do? Very good. Now, I have 3 guesses as to which hat he wore the night he disappeared, and if I guess right, I win. If I don't, you win. See? Ready? Go. I suppose you know the answer yourself, by the way." Do I understand your lordship to be asking what hat Sir Reuben wore when he went out on Monday night, your lordship?" "No, you don't understand a bit," said Lord Peter. "I'm asking if you know. Don't tell me. I'm going to guess." "I do know, your lordship," said Mr. Graves reprovingly. "Well," said Lord Peter, "as he was dining at the Ritz, he wore a topper. Here are 3 toppers. In 3 guesses I'd be bound to hit the right one, wouldn't I? That doesn't seem very sporting. I'll take 1 guess. It was this one." He indicated the hat next the window. "Am I right, Graves? Have I got the prize?" "That is the hat in question, my lord," said Mr. Graves without excitement. "Thanks," said Lord Peter. "That's all I wanted to know. Ask Bunter to step up, would you?" Mr. Bunter stepped up with an aggrieved air, and his usually smooth hair ruffled by the focusing cloth. "Oh, there you are, Bunter," said Lord Peter. "Look here." "Here I am, my lord," said Mr. Bunter with respectful reproach, "but if you'll excuse me saying so, downstairs is where I ought to be. With all those young women about, they'll be fingering the evidence, my lord." "I cry your mercy," said Lord Peter, "but I've quarrelled hopelessly with Mr. Parker and distracted the estimable Graves, and I want you to tell me what fingerprints you have found. I shan't be happy till I get it, so don't be harsh with me, Bunter." "Well, my lord, your lordship understands I haven't photographed them yet, but I won't deny that their appearance is interesting, my lord. The little book off the night-table, my lord, has only the marks of 1 set of fingers. There's a little scar on the right thumb which makes them easy recognized. The hairbrush, too, my lord, has only the same set of marks. The umbrella, the tooth-glass, and the boots all have 2 sets. The hand with the scarred thumb, which I take to be Sir Reuben's, my lord, and a set of smudges superimposed upon them, if I may put it that way, my lord, which may or may not be the same hand in rubber gloves. I could tell you better when I've got the photographs made, to measure them, my lord. The linoleum in front of the washstand is very gratifying indeed, my lord, if you will excuse my mentioning it. Besides, the marks of Sir Reuben's boots, which your lordship pointed out, there's the print of a man's naked foot, a much smaller one, my lord, not much more than a 10-inch sock, I should say, if you asked me." Lord Peter's face became irradiated with almost a dim religious light. "A mistake," he breathed. "A mistake, a little one, but he can't afford it. When was the linoleum washed last, Bunter?" "Monday morning, my lord. The housemaid did it, and remembered to mention it. Only remark she's made yet, and is to the point. The other domestics—" His features expressed disdain. "What did I say, Parker? 5'10" and not an inch longer, and he didn't dare to use the hairbrush. Beautiful. But he had to risk the top hat. Gentlemen can't walk home in the rain late at night without a hat, you know, Parker. Look, what do you make of it? 2 sets of fingerprints on everything but the book and the brush. 2 sets of feet on the linoleum, and 2 kinds of hair in the hat." He lifted the top hat to the light and extricated the evidence with tweezers. "Think of it, Parker, to remember the hairbrush and forget the hat. to remember his fingers all the time, and to make that one careless step on the telltale linoleum. Here they are, you see, black hair and tan hair, black hair in the bowler and the Panama, and black and tan in last night's topper. And then, just to make certain that we're on the right track, just one little auburn hair on the pillow, on this pillow, Parker, which isn't quite in the right place. It almost brings tears to my eyes. "Do you mean to say," said the detective slowly. "I mean to say," said Lord Peter, "that it was not Sir Reuben Levy whom the cook saw last night on the doorstep. I say that it was another man, perhaps a couple of inches shorter, who came here in Levi's clothes and let himself in with Levy's latchkey. Oh, he was a bold, cunning devil, Parker. He had on Levy's boots and every stitch of Levy's clothing down to the skin. He had rubber gloves on his hands, which he never took off, and he did everything he could to make us think that Levy slept here last night. He took his chances and won. He walked upstairs. He undressed. He even washed and cleaned his teeth, though he didn't use the hairbrush for fear of leaving red hairs in it. He had to guess what Levy did with boots and clothes. One guess was wrong and the other right, as it happened. The bed must look as if it had been slept in, so he gets in and lies there in his victim's very pajamas. Then in the morning, sometime, probably in the deadest hour between 2 and 3, he gets up, dresses himself in his own clothes that he's brought with him in a bag, and creeps downstairs. If anybody wakes, he is lost, but he is a bold man, and he takes his chance. He knows that people do not wake as a rule, and they don't wake. He opens the street door which he left on the latch when he came in. He listens for the stray passer-by or the policeman on his beat. He slips out. He pulls the door quietly, too, with the latchkey. He walks briskly away in rubber-soled shoes. He's the kind of criminal who isn't complete without rubber-soled shoes. In a few minutes, he is at Hyde Park Corner. After that... He paused and added, "He did all that, and unless he had nothing at stake, he had everything at stake. Either Sir Reuben Levy has been spirited away for some silly practical joke, or the man with the auburn hair has the guilt of murder upon his soul." "Dear me!" ejaculated the detective. "You're very dramatic about it." Lord Peter passed his hand rather warily over his hair. "My true friend," he murmured in a voice surcharged with emotion, "you recall to me the nursery rhymes of my youth, the sacred duty of flippancy. There was an old man of Whitehaven who danced a quadrille with a raven, but they said it's absurd to encourage that bird, so they smashed that old man of Whitehaven." "That's the correct attitude, Parker. Here's a poor old buffer spirited away. Such a joke. And I don't believe he'd hurt a fly himself. That makes it funnier. Do you know, Parker, I don't care frightfully about this case after all." "Which? This or yours?" "Both, I say, Parker. Shall we go quietly home and have lunch and go to the Colosseum?" "You can if you like," replied the detective, "but you forget I do this for my bread and butter." "I haven't even that excuse," said Lord Peter. "Well, what's the next move? What would you do in my case?" "I'd do some good hard grind," said Parker. "I'd distrust every bit of work Sugg ever did, and I'd get the family history of every tenant of every flat in Queen Caroline Mansions. I'd examine all their box rooms and roof traps, and I would inveigle them into conversations, and suddenly bring in the words body and pince-nez and see if they wriggled, like those modern psycho what's-his-names." "You would you?" said Lord Peter with a grin. "Well, we've exchanged cases, you know, so just you toddle off and do it. I'm going to have a jolly time at Wyndham's." Parker made a grimace. "Well," he said, "I don't suppose you'd ever do it, so I'd better. You'll never become a professional till you learn to do a little work, Whimsy. How about lunch?" "I'm invited out," said Lord Peter magnificently. "I'll run around and change at the club. Can't feed with Freddie, but not in these rags. Bunter?" "Yes, my lord." "Pack up if you're ready, and come round and wash my face and hands for me at the club."
Work here for another 2 hours, my lord. Can't do with less than 30 minutes exposure. The current's none too strong.
You see how I'm bullied by my own man, Parker? Well, I must bear it, I suppose. Ta-ta. He whistled his way downstairs. The conscientious Mr. Parker, with a groan, settled down to a systematic search through Sir Reuben Levy's papers with the assistance of a plate of ham sandwiches and a bottle of Bass. Yes, I think Catbot's taking care of things. What's up? Can I help you with Game Pass? Why does it say 3 months for €1 for the Game Pass if it costs what? I don't understand that. Brotoad, if you're talking about there's a Game Pass special. Well, it's like 3 months for $1 or maybe £1 if you're over in England, I guess. But that's only applicable if you've never had it before. If you've already tried out a Game Pass, I don't believe you can get it anymore. Don't think so. Lord Peter and the Honourable Freddie Arbuthnot, looking together like an advertisement for gents' trouserings, strolled into the dining room at Wyndham's. "Oh, haven't seen you for an age," said the Honourable Freddie. "What have you been doing with yourself?" "Oh, fooling about," said Lord Peter languidly. "Thick or clear?" "Oh, this is the waiter. Good Lord, so many people. Oh. "Thick or clear, sir?" inquired the waiter of the Honourable Freddie.
"Which'll you have, Whimsy?" said that gentleman, transferring the burden of selection to his guest. "They're both equally poisonous."
"Well, clear's less trouble to look out of the spoon," said Lord Peter.
"Clear," said the Honourable Freddie. "Consommé polonais," agreed the waiter. "Very nice, sir."
A conversation languished until the Honourable Freddie found a bone in the filleted sole and sent for the head waiter to explain its presence. When this matter had been adjusted, Lord Peter found energy to say, "Sorry to hear about your governor, old man."
"Yes, poor old buffer," said Honourable Freddie. "They say he can't last long now." "What? Oh, the Montrachet 08. There's nothing fit to drink in this place," he added gloomily.
After this deliberate insult to a noble vintage, there was a further pause till Lord Peter said, "How's change?" "Sup there, BBB?"
"Rotten," said the Honourable Freddie. He helped himself gloomily to a salmi of game.
"Can I do anything?"
"Oh, no, thanks. Very decent of you, but it'll pan out all right in time."
"This isn't a bad salmi," said Lord Peter.
"I've eaten worse," admitted his friend.
"What about those Argentines?" inquired Lord Peter. "Here, waiter, there's a bit of cork in my glass."
"Cork?"
cried the Honourable Freddie, with something approaching animation.
"You'll hear about this, waiter. It's an amazing thing a fellow who's paid to do the job can't manage to take a cork out of a bottle. What you say? Argentines? Gone all to hell. Old Levy, bunking off like that's knocked the bottom out of the market."
"You don't say so," said Lord Peter. "Good morning, Mr. Noble. How you doing? And Orgon, how you doing?" "Yeah." "Orgon's liking that new sticker?" "Yeah. Doing good. Yeah, we're a bit of a frog in the throat for today's readings, but we're getting through it. How you doing?" Gonna be getting some Halo in tonight, by the way. Yeah, it's gonna be fun. All right. Okay. So Orgon's a fan of the new of the 2500 Spark the new sticker made by Jer Henning, by the way. Oh, you're gonna be playing tonight? Nice. Yeah, we've been going through the Halo Wars 2 co-op campaign as well. We've been playing that online with people. That's actually a lot of fun. I'm enjoying that. Oh, here we go. Let's move. Blue.
Oh, Levy bunking off like that's knocked the bottom out of the market.
You don't say so, said Lord Peter. What do you suppose has happened to the old man?
Cursed if I know, said the Honourable Freddy. Knocked on the head by the bears, I should think.
Perhaps he's gone off on his own, suggested Lord Peter. Double life, you know. Giddy old blighters, some of these city men.
Oh, no,
said the Honourable Freddy, faintly roused.
No, hang it all, Whimsy, I wouldn't care to say that. He's a decent old domestic bird, and his daughter's a charming girl. Besides, he's straight enough. He'd do you down fast enough, but he wouldn't let you down. Old Anderson is badly cut up about it.
Who's Anderson?
Chap with property out there. He belongs here. He was going to meet Levy on Tuesday. He's afraid those railway people will get in now, and then it'll be all UP.
Who's running the railway people over here? Inquired Lord Peter.
Yankee blighter. John P. Milligan. He's got an option, or says he has. You can't trust those brutes.
Can't Anderson hold on?
Anderson isn't Levy. Hasn't got the shekels. Besides, he's only one. Levy covers the ground. He could boycott Milligan's beastly railway if he liked. That's where he's got the pull, you see.
Believe I met the Milligan man somewhere, said Lord Peter, thoughtfully. Ain't he a hulking brute with black hair and a beard?
You're thinking of someone else,
said the Honourable Freddy.
Milligan doesn't stand any higher than I do, unless you call 5'10" hulking. And he's bald, anyway.
Lord Peter considered this over the Gorgonzola. Then he said, I didn't know Levy had a charming daughter.
Oh, yes,
said the Honourable Freddy, with an elaborate detachment.
Met her and Mama last year abroad. That's how I got to know the old man. He's been very decent. Let me into this Argentine business on the ground floor, don't you know?
Oh, it's been the Halo Wars campaign is it's really good. It's kind of like it's an extended tutorial really, but it's a lot of fun, and the cutscenes are just like amazing. They did an amazing job on that. Well, said Lord Peter, you might do worse. Money's money, ain't it? And Lady Levy is quite a redeeming point. At least my mother knew her people.
Oh, she's all right, said the Honourable Freddy, and the old man's nothing to be ashamed of nowadays. He's self-made, of course, but he don't pretend to be anything else. No side. Toddles off to business on a 96 bus every morning. Can't make up my mind to taxis, my boy, he says. I had to look at every halfpenny when I was a young man, and I can't get out of the way of it now. Though if he's taken his family out, nothing's too good. Rachel, and that's the girl, always laughs at the old man's little economies.
I suppose they have sent for Lady Levy, said Lord Peter.
I suppose so, agreed the other. I'd better pop round and express sympathy or something, what? Wouldn't look well not to, do you think? But it's deuced awkward. What am I to say?
I don't think it matters much what you say, said Lord Peter helpfully. I should ask if you could do anything.
Thanks,
said the lover.
I will. Energetic. Why did it say it said the lover?
I'm assuming it's some kind of a weird typo.
Thanks, said the lover. I will. Energetic young man. Count on me. Always at your service. Ring me up any time of the day or night. That's the line to take, don't you think?
Oh, that's the idea, said Lord Peter. Mr. John P. Milligan, the London, good Lord, this frog in the throat is terrible. Man. So Skip thinks it's a scam, and they killed the guy to dump the stock price and then buy stock. Then the real guy turn up, and the stock goes back up. Maybe. But people still do that these days, jimmying the market. All right. Mr. John P. Milligan, the London representative of the Great Milligan Railroad and Shipping Company, was dictating code cables to his secretary in an office in Lombard Street when a card was brought up to him bearing the simple legend, Lord Peter Wimsey, Marlborough Club. Mr. Milligan was annoyed at the interruption, but like many of his nation, if he had a weak point, it was the British aristocracy. He postponed for a few minutes the elimination from the map of a modest but promising farm, and directed that the visitor should be shown up. "Good afternoon," said that nobleman, ambling genially in. "It's most uncommonly good of you to let me come in round, wasting your time like this. What is that? What is that?" Don't know what that was. There's a weird gift there, Tillable Cat. "Good afternoon," said that nobleman, ambling genially in. "It's most uncommonly good of you to let me come round wasting your time like this. I'll try not to be too long about it, though I'm not awfully good at coming to the point. My brother never would let me stand for the county, you know. Said I wandered on so nobody knows what I'm talking about." "Pleased to meet you, Lord Wimsey," said Mr. Milligan. "Won't you take a seat?" "Thanks," said Lord Peter, "but I'm not a peer, you know. That's my brother, Denver. My name's Peter. It's a silly name, I always think, so old world and full of homely virtue and that sort of thing. But my godfathers and godmothers and my baptism are responsible for that, I suppose, officially. Which is rather hard on them, you know, as they didn't actually choose it. But we always have a Peter, after the third Duke, who betrayed 5 kings somewhere about the Wars of the Roses, though to come to think of it, that ain't anything to be proud of. Still, one has to make the best of it." Mr. Milligan, thus ingeniously placed at that disadvantage which attends ignorance, maneuvered for position, and offered his interrupter a Corona. What is a Corona? Oh, a cigar. Yeah. "Thanks awfully," said Lord Peter, "though you really mustn't tempt me to stay here burbling all afternoon. By Jove, Mr. Milligan, if you offer people such comfortable chairs and cigars like these, I wonder they don't come and live in your office." He added mentally, "I wish to goodness I could get those long-toed boots off you. How's a man to know the size of your feet? And a head like a potato, it's enough to make one swear." "Say now, Lord Peter," said Mr. Milligan, "can I do anything for you?" "Well, do you know," said Lord Peter, "I'm wondering if you would. It's damned cheek to ask you, but the fact is, it's my mother, you know, a wonderful woman, but don't realize what it means, demands on the time of a busy man like you. We don't understand hustle over here, you know, Mr. Milligan." "Now, you don't mention that. Now, don't you mention that," said Mr. Milligan. "I'd be surely charmed to do anything to oblige the Duchess." He felt a momentary qualm as to whether a duke's mother were also a duchess, but breathed more freely as Lord Peter went on. "Thanks, that's uncommonly good of you. Well, now, it's like this. My mother, most energetic, self-sacrificing woman, don't you see, is thinking of getting up a sort of charity bazaar down at Denver this winter, in aid of the church roof, you know. Very sad case, Mr. Milligan. Fine, old, antique. Early English windows and decorated angel roof and all that, all tumbling to pieces, rain pouring in and so on, vicar catching rheumatism at early service, owing to the draught blowing in over the altar. You know the sort of thing. They've got a man down starting on it, little beggar called Phipps, lives with an aged mother in Battersea, vulgar little beast, but quite good on angel roofs and things, I'm told." At this point, Phipps was the person who discovered the body. Phipps owns Phipps had the apartment in which the body was found. Yeah. At this point, Lord Peter watched his interlocutor narrowly, but finding that this rigmarole produced in him no reaction more startling than polite interest, tinged with faint bewilderment, he abandoned this line of investigation, and proceeded. "I say, I beg your pardon frightfully. I'm afraid I'm being beastly long-winded. Fact is, my mother is getting up this bazaar, and she thought it'd be an awfully interesting sideshow to have some lectures, sort of little talks, you know, by eminent businessmen of all nations. How I did it kind of touch, you know. A drop of oil with a kerosene king, cash conscience and cocoa, and so on. It would interest people down there no end. You see, all my mother's friends will be there, and we've none of us any money. Well, not what you'd call money. I mean, I expect our incomes wouldn't pay your telephone calls, would they? But we like awfully to hear about the people who can make money. Gives us a sort of uplifted feeling, don't you know? Well, anyway, I mean, my mother would be frightfully pleased and grateful to you, Mr. Milligan, if you'd come down and give us a few words as a representative American. It needn't take more than 10 minutes or so, you know, because the local people can't understand much beyond shootin' and huntin', and my mother's crowd can't keep their minds on anything more than 10 minutes together, but would really appreciate it very much if you'd come and stay a day or two and just give us a little breezy word on the almighty dollar." "Why, yes," said Mr. Milligan. "I'd like to, Lord Peter. It's kind of the Duchess to suggest it. It's a very sad thing when these fine old antiques begin to wear out. I'll come with great pleasure, and perhaps you'd be kind enough to accept a little donation to the Restoration Fund." This unexpected development nearly brought Lord Peter up all standing. To pump, by means of an ingenious lie, a hospitable gentleman whom you are inclined to suspect of a peculiarly malicious murder, and to accept from him in the course of the proceedings a large check for a charitable object, has something about it unpalatable to any but the hardened Secret Service agent. Lord Peter temporized. "Oh, that's awfully decent of you," he said. "I'm sure there'd be no end grateful, but you'd better not give it to me, you know. I might spend it or lose it. I'm not very reliable, I'm afraid. The vicar's the right person, the Reverend Constantine Throgmorton, St. John before the Latin Gate Vicarage, Duke's Denver, if you like to send it there." "I will," said Mr. Milligan. "Will you write it out now for £1,000, Scoot, in case it slips my mind later?" The secretary, a sandy-haired young man with a long chin and no eyebrows, silently did as he was requested. Lord Peter looked from the bald head of Mr. Milligan to the red head of the secretary, hardened his heart, and tried again. "Well, I'm no end grateful to you, Mr. Milligan, and so'll my mother be when I tell her. I'll let you know the date of the bazaar. It's not quite settled yet, and I've got to see some other businessmen, don't you know. I thought of asking someone from one of the big newspaper combines to represent British advertisin' talent. What? And a friend of mine promises me a leadin' German financier. Very interesting, if there ain't too much feelin' against it down in the country, and I'll have to find somebody or other to do the Hebrew point of view. I thought of asking Levy, you know, only he's floated off in this inconvenient way." "Yes," said Mr. Milligan, "that's a very curious thing, though I don't mind saying, Lord Peter, that it's a convenience to me. He had a cinch on my railroad combine, but I'd nothing against him personally, and if he turns up after I've brought off a little deal I've got on, I'll be happy to give him the right hand of welcome." A vision passed through Lord Peter's mind of Sir Reuben kept somewhere in custody till a financial crisis was over. This was exceedingly possible, and far more agreeable than his earlier conjecture. It also agreed better with the impression he was forming of Mr. Milligan. "Well, it's a rum go," said Lord Peter, "but I dare say he had his reasons. Much better not to inquire into people's reasons, you know what. Especially as a police friend of mine who's connected with the case says the old Johnny dyed his hair before he went." Out of the tail of his eye, Lord Peter saw the red-headed secretary add up 5 columns of figures simultaneously and jot down the answer. "Dyed his hair, did he?" said Mr. Milligan. "Dyed it red," said Lord Peter. The secretary looked up.
Odd thing is, continued Whimsy, they can't lay hands on the bottle. Something fishy there, don't you think? What? The secretary's interest seemed to have evaporated. He inserted a fresh sheet into his loose-leaf ledger and carried forward a row of digits from the preceding page. I dare say there's nothing in it, said Lord Peter, rising to go. Well, it's uncommonly good of you to be bothered with me like this, Mr. Milligan. My mother will be no end pleased. She'll write you about the date. I'm charmed, said Mr. Milligan. Very pleased to have met you. Mr. Scoot rose silently to open the door, uncoiling as he did so a portentous length of thin leg, hitherto hidden by the desk. With a mental sigh, Lord Peter estimated him at 6'4". It's a pity I can't put Scoot's head on Milligan's shoulders, said Lord Peter, emerging into the swirl of the city. And what will my mother say? Because he made all that up. Skip says, when you go to the link, it says authorize. I press it, then nothing. Oh. It should open a pop-up window. It should open a pop-up window. So if you have like pop-up blockers or something like that on, then maybe it won't show up like that. But you're talking about to change your character, right, on the extension? Yeah, if you exclamation extension, maybe they've updated it. Let me just check here. Stream avatars. Ah. Waiting. Well, okay, it took a while to load, but it did load in. Oh yeah, and yeah, if you're on a console, it doesn't work on a console. Okay, so I should have just changed mine. My one should have just changed into the Final Fantasy thing. You're on a tablet? Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, if you're on a and you're doing it on a web browser, right? You're not using the Mixer app. Yeah, so it definitely does work. I just changed my character. So Cyber Seas on an Xbox console, yeah. Okay, yeah. So you can't change the characters if you're on the console, but yeah, if you're in a web browser, yeah, you can exclamation extension or use that link there, and yeah, it opens a pop-up window, authorize it, and yeah, it took probably 20 seconds for the page to load up. It's all good, Skip. It's all good. Okay, gonna get on with chapter 5. That was a long chapter we just read through, by the way. A long chapter. Good gracious. Okay, you know, I need to have a little sip of coffee. Was it still 10 past 11 already? Good lord. The day is slipping on by. All right, let's get on with it. Chapter 5. Mr. Parker, Mr. Parker is the detective, Scotland Yard detective, by the way. Mr. Parker was a bachelor and occupied a Georgian but inconvenient flat at number 12A Great Ormond Street, for which he paid £1 a week. His exertions in the cause of civilization were rewarded, not by the gift of diamond rings from empresses or munificent checks from grateful prime ministers, but by a modest, though sufficient, salary drawn from the pockets of the British taxpayer.
He awoke, after a long day of arduous and inconclusive labor, to the smell of burnt porridge. Through his bedroom window, hygienically open top and bottom, a raw fog was rolling slowly in, and the sight of a pair of winter pants flung hastily over a chair the previous night fretted him with a sense of the sordid absurdity of the human form. The telephone bell rang, and he crawled wretchedly out of bed and into the sitting-room, where Mrs. Munns, who did for him by the day, was laying the table, sneezing as she went. Mr. Bunter was speaking. Who's Mr. Bunter? Mr. Bunter's the butler, right.
His lordship says he'd be very glad, sir, if you could make it convenient to step round to breakfast.
If the odor of kidneys and bacon had been wafted along the wire, Mr. Parker could not have experienced a more vivid sense of consolation.
"I tell his lordship I'll be with him in half an hour,"
he said thankfully, and plunging into the bathroom, which was also the kitchen, he informed Mrs. Munns, who was just making tea from a kettle which had gone off the boil, that he should be out to breakfast.
"You can take the porridge home for the family,"
he added viciously, and flung off his dressing-gown with such determination that Mrs. Munns could only scuttle away with a snort. A 19 bus deposited him in Piccadilly only 15 minutes later than his rather sanguine impulse had prompted him to suggest, and Mr. Bunter served him with glorious food, incomparable coffee, and the Daily Mail before a blazing fire of wood and coal. A distant voice singing the Et iterum venturus est from Bach's Mass in B minor proclaimed that for the owner of the flat, cleanliness and godliness met at least once a day, and presently Lord Peter roamed in, moist and verbena-scented, in a bath-robe cheerfully patterned with unnaturally variegated peacocks. What is verbena? What is verbena? I'm just going to look that one up. What is verbena? Verbena scented. Verbena, oh, it's a type of flower. Okay. They got the little tiny flowers. Tiny flowers. Hey, Lady Death, what's up? Ba-da-ba-da-bow. There we go. On the prowl. On the prowl, yeah. How's Lady Death doing today? Got all them kiddies ready for their homeschooling? Oh, it's kidding. You just got home only a few minutes before school starts. School's changed a lot. School has changed a lot, hasn't it? And, Cyber C says, just interesting seeing someone read. A very good idea. Yeah, I've been doing this for about 2 years. About 2 years, Mr. Cyber C. I'm assuming it's a Mr. Maybe it's a Ms. Who knows? Verbena is lemony. Okay, it smells lemony. I didn't know that. Yeah. Yeah. Let's okay. It's a sip more coffee, and we'll get back into our story. This is such a. I don't know. This book is it's almost a. It's almost like Sherlock Holmes fan fiction, is what it is. Very good. Oh, Urzus is in the house. Hey, man. Here is, by the way, here is the new sticker. New sticker today. Yay! Very good. I like that one. What do you think? It's very nice. Very nice. Yep. That's another one by J.R. Henning. I need to get one more, and that'll make a nice selection of 4 of them from Mr. J.R. Henning. I'm very excited. Very exciting. Exactly. Okay. Let's get back on with our story though. In the meantime, here we go. Peter roamed in, moist and verbena-scented, in a bathrobe cheerfully patterned with unnaturally variegated peacocks. "Mornin', old dear," said that gentleman. "A beast of a day, ain't it? Very good of you to trundle out in it, but I had a letter I wanted you to see, and I hadn't the energy to come round to your place. Bunter and I have been making a night of it." "What's the letter?" asked Parker.
Never talk business with your mouth full, said Lord Peter reprovingly. Have some Oxford marmalade, and then I'll show you my Dante. They brought it round last night. What ought I to read this morning, Bunter? Lord Erith's collection is going to be sold, my lord. There's a column about it in the Morning Post. I think your lordship should look at this review of Sir Julian Freke's new book on the psychological bases of the conscience in the Times Literary Supplement. Then there is a very singular little burglary in the Chronicle, my lord, and an attack on titled families in the Herald. Rather ill-written, if I may say so, but not without unconscious humour, which your lordship might appreciate.
Well, all right, give me that and the burglary, said his lordship. Good morning, Rose. How are you doing? Good morning, Rose. What is shaken?
I have looked over the other papers, pursued Mr. Bunter, indicating a formidable pile, and marked your lordship's after-breakfast reading.
Oh, pray don't allude to it, said Lord Peter. You take my appetite away. There was silence, but for the crunching of toast and the crackling of paper.
I see they adjourned the inquest, said Parker presently.
Nothing else to do, said Lord Peter, but Lady Levy arrived last night and will have to go and fail to identify the body this morning for Suggs' benefit.
Time, too, said Mr. Parker shortly.
Silence fell again.
I don't think much of your burglary, Bunter, said Lord Peter. Competent, of course, but no imagination. I want imagination in a criminal. Where's the Morning Post?
After a further silence, Lord Peter said,
You might send for the catalogue, Bunter. That Apollonius Rhodius might be worth looking at. No, I'm damned if I'm going to stodge through that review, but you can stick the book on the library list if you want. His book on crime was entertaining enough as far as it went, but the fellow's got a bee in his bonnet. Thinks God's a secretion of the liver. All right, once in a way, but there's no need to keep on about it. There's nothing you can't prove if your outlook is only sufficiently limited. Look at Sugg. I beg your pardon, said Parker. I wasn't attending. Argentines are steadying a little, I see.
Milligan, said Lord Peter.
Oil's in a bad way. Levy's made a difference there. That funny little boom in Peruvians that came on just before he disappeared has died away again. I wonder if he was concerned in it. Do you know it all?
I'll find out, said Lord Peter.
What was it? Oh, an absolute dud enterprise that hadn't been heard of for years. It suddenly took a little lease of life last week. I happened to notice it because my mother got let in for a couple of 100 shares a long time ago. It never paid a dividend. Now it's petered out again.
Whimsy pushed his plate aside and lit a pipe. Having finished, I don't mind doing some work, he said. How did you get on yesterday?
I didn't, replied Parker. I sleuthed up and down those flats in my own bodily shape and 2 different disguises. I was a gas-meter man and a collector for a home for lost doggies, and I didn't get a thing to go on, except a servant in the top flat at the Battersea Bridge Road end of the row, who said she thought she heard a bump on the roof one night. Asked which night, she couldn't rightly say. Asked if it was Monday night, she thought it very likely. Asked if it mightn't have been that high wind on Saturday night that blew my chimney pot off. She couldn't say but what it might have been. Asked if she was sure it was on the roof and not inside the flat. Said to be sure they did find a picture tumbled down next morning. Very suggestible girl. I saw your friends, Mr. and Mrs. Appledore, who received me coldly but could make no definite complaint about Phipps, except that his mother dropped her H's, and that he once called on them uninvited, armed with a pamphlet about anti-vivisection. The Indian colonel on the first floor was loud, but unexpectedly friendly. He gave me Indian curry for supper, and some very good whiskey, but he's a sort of a hermit, and all he could tell me was that he couldn't stand Mrs. Appledore.
Did you get nothing at the house?
Only Levy's private diary. I brought it away with me. Here it is. It doesn't tell one much, though. It's full of entries like Tom and Annie to dinner, and my dear wife's birthday. Gave her an old opal ring. Mr. Arthbernot dropped into tea. He wants to marry Rachel, but I should like someone steadier for my treasure. Still, I thought it would show who came to the house and so on. He evidently wrote it up at night. There's no entry for Monday.
I expect it'll be useful, said Lord Peter, turning over the pages. Poor old Buffer. I say, I'm not so certain now he was done away with. He detailed to Mr. Parker his day's work.
Arbuthnot. Oh, Arbuthnot, said Parker. Is that the Arbuthnot of the diary?
I suppose so. I hunted him up because I knew he was fond of fooling round the stock exchange. As for Milligan, he looks all right, but I believe he's pretty ruthless in business, and you never can tell. Then there's the red-haired secretary, lightning calculator man, with a face like a fish, keeps on saying nothing. Got the tar baby in his family tree, I should... Good Lord! Milligan's got a jolly good motive for, at any rate, suspending Levy for a few days. Then there's the new man.
What new man?
Ah, that's the letter I mentioned to you. Where did I put it? Here we are. Good parchment paper. Printed address of solicitor's office in Salisbury and postmark to correspond. Very precisely written, with a fine nib by an elderly businessman of some old-fashioned habits. Oh no, that was Lord. I got my people muddled up. Oh yeah, yeah. That's okay. So this is Lord Whimsy's got the letter. Okay, that's the letter I mentioned to you. Where'd I put it? Here we are. Good parchment paper, printed address of solicitor's office in Salisbury, and postmark to correspond. Very precisely written, with a fine nib by an elderly businessman of old-fashioned habits. Parker took the letter and read. Crimplesham and Wicks, solicitors, Milford Hall, Salisbury, 17th November, 1920... something. Sir, with reference to your advertisement today in the personal column of the Times, I am disposed to believe that the eyeglasses and chain in question may be those I lost on the Allenby and S&C Electric Railway while visiting London last Monday. I left Victoria by the 5:45 train and did not notice my loss till I arrived at Balham. This indication and the optician's specification of the glasses, which I enclose, should suffice at once as an identification and a guarantee of my bona fides. If the glasses should prove to be mine, I should be greatly obliged to you if you would kindly forward them to me by registered post, as the chain was a present from my daughter and is one of my dearest possessions. Thanking you in advance for this kindness, and regretting the trouble to which I shall be putting you, I am yours very truly, Thomas Crimplesham. Yeah. Oh yeah. We do special requests quite often. Yeah. Lord Peter Whimsy, 110 Piccadilly West, enclosed.
Dear me, said Parker, this is what you might call unexpected.
Well, either it is some extraordinary misunderstanding, said Lord Peter, or Mr. Crimplesham is very bold and or Mr. Crimplesham is a very bold and cunning villain, or possibly, of course, they are the wrong glasses. We may as well get a ruling on that point at once. I suppose the glasses are at the Yard. I wish you'd just ring 'em up and ask 'em to send round an optician's description of them at once. And you might ask at the same time whether it's a very common prescription.
Right you are, said Parker,
and took the receiver off its hook. And now, said his friend, when the message was delivered, just come into the library for a minute. On the library table, Lord Peter had spread out a series of bromide prints, some dry, some damp, and some but half-washed. These little ones are the originals of the photos we've been taking, said Lord Peter, and these big ones are enlargements, all made to precisely the same scale. This one here is the footmark on the linoleum. We'll put that by itself at present. Now, these fingerprints can be divided into 5 lots. I've numbered them on the prints, see, and made a list. A. The fingerprints of Levy himself, off his little bedside book and his hairbrush. This and this. You can't mistake the little scar on the thumb. B. The smudges made by the gloved fingers of the man who slept in Levy's room on Monday night. They show clearly on the water bottle and on the boots, superimposed on Levy's. They are very distinct on the boots, surprisingly so for gloved hands, and I deduce that the gloves were rubber ones and had recently been in water. Here's another interesting point. Levy walked in the rain on Monday night, as we know, and these dark marks are mud splashes. You see, they lie over Levy's fingerprints in every case. Now see, on this left boot we find the stranger's thumb mark over the mud on the leather above the heel. That's a funny place to find a thumb mark on a boot, isn't it? That is, if Levy took off his own boots. But it's the place where you'd expect to see it if somebody forcibly removed his boots for him. Again, most of the stranger's finger marks come over the mud marks, but here is one splash of mud which comes on top of them again, which makes me infer that the stranger came back to Park Lane, wearing Levy's boots, in a cab, carriage, or car, but that at some point or other he walked a little way, just enough to tread in a puddle and get a splash on the boots. What do you say? "Very pretty," said Parker. "A bit intricate, though, and the marks are not all that I could have wished a fingerprint to be." "Well, I won't lay too much stress on it, but it fits in with our previous ideas. Now, let's turn to C. The prints obligingly left by my own particular villain on the further edge of Thip's bath, where you spotted them, and I ought to be scourged for not having spotted them. The left hand, you notice, the base of the palm and the fingers, but not the tips, looking as though he had steadied himself on the edge of the bath while leaning down to adjust something at the bottom. The pince-nez, perhaps? Gloves, you see, but showing no ridge or seam of any kind. I say rubber, you say rubber. That's that. Now see here. D and E come off a visiting card of mine. There's this thing at the corner, marked F, but that you can disregard. In the original document, it's a sticky mark left by the thumb of the youth who took it from me, after first removing a piece of chewing gum from his teeth with his finger to tell me that Mr. Milligan might or might not be disengaged. D and E are the thumb marks of Mr. Milligan and his red-haired secretary. I'm not clear which is which, but I saw the youth with the chewing gum hand the card to the secretary, and when I got into the inner shrine I saw John P. Milligan standing with it in his hand. So it's one or the other, and for the moment it's immaterial to our purpose which is which. I boned the card from the table when I left. Well, now, Parker, here's what's been keeping Bunter and me up till the small hours. I've measured and measured every way backwards and forwards till my head's spinning, and I've stared till I'm nearly blind, but I'm hanged if I can make my mind up. Question 1, is C identical with B? Question 2, is D or E identical with B? There's nothing to go on but the size and shape, of course, and the marks are so faint. What do you think? Cyber C's out of here. Okay, have a great night, Cyber C. Wuthering Heights is... Yeah, that's on my list of books to do this year. Oh, yeah, that would be a very good one to read. Are these identical? Parker shook his head doubtfully. I think E might almost be out of the question, he said. It seems such an excessively long and narrow thumb. But I think there's a decided resemblance between the span of B on the water bottle and C on the bath, and I don't see any reason why D shouldn't be the same as B, only there's so little to judge from. Your untutored judgment and my measurements have brought us both to the same conclusion, if you can call it a conclusion, said Lord Peter bitterly. Another thing, said Parker. Why on earth should we try to connect B with C? The fact that you and I happen to be friends doesn't make it necessary to conclude that the two cases we happen to be interested in have any organic connection with one another. Why should they? The only person who thinks they have is Sugg, and he's nothing to go by. It would be different if there were any truth in the suggestion that the man in the bath was Levy, but we know for a certainty he wasn't. It's ridiculous to suppose that the same man was employed in committing two totally distinct crimes on the same night, one in Battersea and the other in Park Lane. I know, said Whimsy, though of course we mustn't forget that Levy was in Battersea at the time, and now we know he didn't return home at 12 as was supposed. We've no reason to think he ever left Battersea at all. True, but there are other places in Battersea besides Thip's bathroom, and he wasn't in Thip's bathroom. In fact, come to think of it, that's the one place in the universe where we know definitely that he wasn't. So what's Thip's bath got to do with it? I don't know, said Lord Peter. Well, perhaps we shall get something better to go on today. He leaned back in his chair and smoked thoughtfully for some time over the papers which Bunter had marked for him. They've got you out in the limelight, he said. Who's this? Okay, Lord Peter again. They're not very good at identifying who's speaking in this one. Yeah, Catpot, it's temperamental. They've got you out in the limelight, he said. Thank heaven. Sugg hates me too much to give me any publicity. What a dull agony column. Darling Pipsy, come back soon to your distracted Popsy. And the usual young man in need of financial assistance, and the usual injunction to remember thy Creator in the days of thy youth. Hello. There's the bell. Oh, it's our answer from Scotland Yard. The note from Scotland Yard enclosed an optician's specification identical with that sent by Mr. Crimplesham, and added that it was an unusual one, owing to the peculiar strength of the lenses and the marked difference between the sight of the two eyes. That's good enough, said Parker. Yes, said Whimsy. Then possibility number 3 is knocked on the head. There remains possibility number 1, accident or misunderstanding, and number 2, deliberate villainy of a remarkably bold and calculating kind, of a kind, in fact, characteristic of the author or authors of our two problems. Following the methods inculcated at that... What does inculcated mean? To instilled by persistent instruction. Okay. Following the methods inculcated at that university, of which I have the honor to be a member, we will now examine severally the various suggestions afforded by possibility number 2. This possibility may again be subdivided into 2 or more hypotheses. On hypothesis 1, strongly advocated by my distinguished colleague, Professor Snupshid, the criminal, whom we may designate as X, is not identical with Crimplesham, but is using the name of Crimplesham as his shield or aegis. This hypothesis may be further subdivided into 2 alternatives. Alternative A. Crimplesham is an innocent and unconscious accomplice, and X is in his employment. X writes in Crimplesham's name on Crimplesham's office paper and obtains that the object in question, i.e. the eyeglasses, be dispatched to Crimplesham's address. He's in a position to intercept the parcel before it reaches Crimplesham. The presumption is that X is Crimplesham's charwoman, office boy, clerk, secretary, or porter. This offers a wide field of investigation. The method of inquiry will be to interview Crimplesham and discover whether he sent the letter, and if not, who has access to his correspondence. Alternative B. Crimplesham is under X's influence or in his power and has been induced to write the letter by A. bribery, B. misrepresentation, or C. threats. X may, in that case, be a persuasive relation or friend, or else a creditor, blackmailer, or assassin. Crimplesham, on the other hand, is obviously venal or a fool. What venal? Showing or motivated by susceptibility to bribery. The method of inquiry in this case, I would tentatively suggest, is again to interview Crimplesham, put the facts of the case strongly before him, and assure him in the most intimidating terms that he is liable to a prolonged term of penal servitude as an accessory after the fact in the crime of murder. Ahem. Trusting, gentlemen, that you have followed me thus far, we will pass to the consideration of hypothesis number 2, to which I personally incline, and according to which X is identical with Crimplesham. In this case, Crimplesham, who is, in the words of an English classic, a man of infinite resource and sagacity, correctly deduces that, of all people, the last whom we shall expect to find answering our advertisement is the criminal himself. Accordingly, he plays a bold game of bluff. He invents an occasion on which the glasses may very easily have been lost or stolen, and applies for them. If confronted, nobody will be more astonished than he to learn where they were found. He will produce witnesses to prove that he left Victoria at 5:45 and emerged from the train at Balham at the scheduled time, and sat up all Monday night playing chess with a respectable gentleman well known in Balham. In this case, the method of inquiry will be to pump the respectable gentleman in Balham, and if he should happen to be a single gentleman with a deaf housekeeper, it may be no easy matter to impugn the alibi, since outside detective romances, few ticket collectors and bus conductors keep an exact remembrance of all the passengers passing between Balham and London on any and every evening of the week. Finally, gentlemen, I will frankly point out the weak point of all these hypotheses, namely, that none of them offers any explanation as to why the incriminating article was left so conspicuously on the body in the first instance. Mr. Parker had listened with commendable patience to this academic exposition. "Might not X," he suggested, "be an enemy of Crimplesham's, who designed to throw suspicion upon him?" "He might. In that case, he should be easy to discover, since he obviously lives in close proximity to Crimplesham and his glasses, and Crimplesham, in fear of his life, will then be a valuable ally for the prosecution." "How about the first possibility of all, misunderstanding or accident?" Well, for purposes of discussion, nothing, because it really doesn't afford any data for discussion. "In any case," said Parker, "the obvious course appears to be to go to Salisbury." "That seems indicated," said Lord Peter. "Very well," said the detective. "Is it to be you or me or both of us?" "It is to be me," said Lord Peter, "and that for 2 reasons. First, because if, by possibility number 2, hypothesis 1, alternative A, Crimplesham is an innocent cat's paw, the person who put in the advertisement is the proper person to hand over the property. Secondly, because if we are to adopt hypothesis 2, we must not overlook this sinister possibility that Crimplesham X is laying a careful trap to rid himself of the person who so unwarily advertised in the daily press his interest in the solution of the Battersea Park mystery. Good Lord, there's some big sentences going on here. Yeah. You want the you need the link later on? Yeah, well, yeah, you can do if you exclamation extension, you can bring it up anytime. This one here. Oh, wrong one. Blah blah blah. Yeah, that word there, extension, but put an exclamation mark in front of it. That also opens it up. You can do it anytime. "That appears to me to be an argument for our both going," objected the detective. "Far from it," said Lord Peter. "Why play into the hands of Crimplesham X by delivering over to him the only 2 men in London with the evidence, such as it is, and shall I say the wits, to connect him with the Battersea body? But if we told the Yard where we were going and we both got nobbled," said Mr. Parker, "it would afford strong presumptive evidence of Crimplesham's guilt. And anyhow, if he didn't get hanged for murdering the man in the bath, he'd at least get hanged for murdering us." "Well," said Lord Peter, "if he only murdered me, you could still hang him. What's the good of wasting a sound, marriageable young male like yourself? Besides, how about old Levy? If you're incapacitated, do you think anybody else is going to find him?"
But we could frighten Crimplesham by threatening him with a yard. Well, dash it all, if it comes to that, I can frighten him by threatening him with you, which, seeing you hold what evidence there is much more to the point. And then suppose it's a wild goose chase after all. You'll have wasted time when you might have been getting on with the case. There are several things that need doing. Well, said Parker, silenced but reluctant. Why can't I go in that case? Bosh, said Lord Peter. I am retained by old Mrs. Thipps, for whom I entertain the greatest respect, to deal with this case, and it's only by courtesy I allow you to have anything to do with it. Mr. Parker groaned. Will you at least take Bunter? He said. In deference to your feelings, replied Lord Peter, I will take Bunter, though he could be far more usefully employed taking photographs or overhauling my wardrobe. When is there a good train to Salisbury, Bunter? There's an excellent train at 10:50, my lord. Kindly make arrangements to catch it, said Lord Peter, throwing off his bathrobe and trailing away with it into his bedroom. And, Parker, if you have nothing else to do, you might get hold of Levy's secretary and look into that little matter of the Peruvian oil. Man, there's all kinds of financial skullduggery going on there. They keep mentioning that, some kind of, some Argentine oil deals going down. Oh, what's that, biker chick? Ah, that's what it, okay, right, that's gotta be an Easter sticker, that's what it is. What? Trying to attack me, what? The body has a name now. Murder. They are still not 100% that the murder victim is who it is. And yeah, there's we're 37% into the book, and they're still not sure of the identity of the dead body. All they know is that the body was found. A body was found. The dumb guy at Scotland Yard said it is obviously the body of Mr. Levy, who went missing the night before in a different city. But no one's been able to positively identify him because the wife is out of town, out of country actually. And I guess he had no friends, I guess. Well, that's kind of weird. They didn't bring any of his acquaintances, even business acquaintances, by to identify the body. So the assumption is that that the dead man is Mr. Levy, but they don't know for sure. There's only two things that they know. One, they have a body, and two, that Mr. Levy has disappeared. Whether he was murdered or if he's just like laying low or if he's been kidnapped, they don't know. But people are making assumptions all over the place. Nasty ears and feet. Oh yeah, he did. Yeah, he did. Maybe he died of too much earwax. That could be a thing. Could be a thing. Never can tell. Right. Lord Peter took with him, for light reading in the train, Sir Reuben Levy's diary. It was a simple, and, in the light of recent facts, rather a pathetic document. The terrible fighter of the Stock Exchange, who could with one nod set the surly bear dancing, or bring the savage bull to feed out of his hand, whose breath devastated whole districts with famine, or swept financial potentates from their seats, was revealed in private life as kindly, domestic, innocently proud of himself and his belongings, confiding, generous, and a little dull. His own small economies were duly chronicled side by side with extravagant presents to his wife and daughter.
Small incidents of household routine appeared, such as man came to mend the conservatory roof, or the new butler, Simpson, has arrived, recommended by the Goldbergs. I think he will be satisfactory. All visitors and entertainments were duly entered, from a very magnificent lunch to Lord Dewsbury, the Minister for Foreign Affairs, and Dr. Jabez K. Wart, the American plenipotentiary, through a series of diplomatic dinners to eminent financiers, down to intimate family gatherings of persons designated by Christian names or nicknames. About May there came a mention of Lady Levy's nerves, and further reference was made to the subject in subsequent months. In September it was stated that Freke came to see my dear wife and advised complete rest and change of scene. She thinks of going abroad with Rachel. The name of the famous nerve specialist occurred as a diner or luncher about once a month, and it came into Lord Peter's mind that Freke would be a good person to consult about Levy himself. People sometimes tell things to the doctor, he murmured to himself, and by Jove, if Levy was simply going round to see Freke on Monday night, that rather disposes of the Battersea incident, doesn't it? He made a note to look up Sir Julian and turned on further. On September 18th, Lady Levy and her daughter had left for the south of France. Then, suddenly, under the date October 5th, Lord Peter found what he was looking for: Goldberg, Skriner, and Milligan to dinner. There was the evidence that Milligan had been in that house. There had been a formal entertainment, a meeting as of two duelists shaking hands before the fight. Skriner was a well-known picture dealer. Lord Peter imagined an after-dinner excursion upstairs to see the two Corots on the drawing-room, and the portrait of the oldest Levy girl, who had died at the age of 16. It was by Augustus John, and hung in the bedroom. The name of the red-haired secretary was nowhere mentioned, unless the initial S, occurring in another entry, referred to him. Throughout September and October, Anderson, of Wyndham's, had been a frequent visitor. Lord Peter shook his head over the diary and turned to the consideration of the Battersea Park mystery. Whereas in the Levy affair it was easy enough to supply a motive for the crime, if crime it were, and the difficulty was to discover the method of its carrying out and the whereabouts of the victim. In the other case, the chief obstacle to inquiry was the entire absence of any imaginable motive. Blah, 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 blah. It was odd that, although the papers had carried news of the affair from one end of the country to the other...
Jelly Buns sent 50 embers with the message, "Spill 2, 40 minutes left in the workday."
Oh, my Lord.
Send help.
Send help. You're almost there. You are almost there. You can do it, Jelly Buns. You are going to get through to the end of the day. Hang in there. Hang in there. It's kind of nice that you get to you get to tune into Mixer though while you're working. That's kind of nice. A lot of jobs you can't do that at. And thank you for the embers. Thank you. It was odd that, although the papers had carried news of the affair from one end of the country to the other, and a description of the body had been sent to every police station in the country, nobody has as yet come forward to identify the mysterious occupant of Mr. Thipp's bath. It was true that the description, which mentioned the clean-shaven chin, elegantly cut hair, and the pince-nez, was rather misleading, but on the other hand the police had managed to discover the number of molars missing, and the height, complexion, and other data was correctly enough stated, as also the date at which death had presumably occurred. It seemed, however, as though the man had melted out of society without leaving a gap or so much as a ripple. Assigning a motive for the murder of a person without relations or antecedents or even clothes is like trying to visualize the fourth dimension. Admirable exercise for the imagination, but arduous and inconclusive. Even if the day's interview should disclose black spots in the past or present Even if the day's interview should disclose black spots in the past or present of Mr. Crimplesham, how were they to be brought into connection with a person apparently without a past, and whose present was confined to the narrow limits of a bath and a police mortuary? "Bunter," said Lord Peter, "I beg that in the future you will restrain me from starting 2 hares at once. These cases are getting to be a strain on my constitution. One hare has nowhere to run from, and the other has nowhere to run to. It's a kind of mental DT, Bunter. When this is over, I shall turn pussyfoot, forswear the police news, and take to an emollient diet of the works of the late Charles Garvice. Who's Charles Garvice? Look him up. Who's Charles Garvice? Uh, 1850 to 1920, a prolific British writer of over 150 romance novels. Also, he wrote books as Caroline Hart. Huh. Oh, wow. Oh yeah, yeah. Here's another. This is like another one of those little nods at real life. There, okay. The most successful novelist in England, according to Arnold Bennett in 1910. He published novels selling over 7 million copies worldwide by 1914, and since 1913 he was selling 1.75 million books a year, a pace which he maintained at least until his death. Despite his enormous success, he was poorly received by literary critics. Right. All right, interesting. Okay, so Lord Peter Wimsey says, he's just about ready to give up the detective business and take to an emollient diet of the works of the late Charles Garvice. Alrighty. Finger pointing at the moon. Do not look at your finger or you miss yeah, I mean, yeah, you have to look stuff up. What's the point of, otherwise the words don't mean anything. Yeah. And it helps put it into context. I mean, like when I saw that thing, my first assumption there was he was some kind of fancy chef, this dude, and they're talking about, like, this big emollient diet. But no, he's talking about just getting, just going through all the books is what he means. Interesting. Okay, right. It was its comparative proximity to Milford Hall that induced Lord Peter to lunch at the Minster Hotel rather than at the White Hart or some other more picturesquely situated hostel. It was not a lunch calculated to cheer his mind. As in all cathedral cities, the atmosphere of the close pervades every nook. And the atmosphere of the close pervades every nook and corner of Salisbury, and no food in that city but seems faintly flavored with prayer books. As he sat sadly consuming that impassive pale substance known to the English as cheese, unqualified, for there are cheeses which go openly by their names, such as Stilton, Camembert, Gruyere, Wensleydale, or Gorgonzola, but cheese is cheese, and everywhere the same. He inquired of the waiter the whereabouts of Mr. Crimplesham's office. The waiter directed him to a house rather further up the street on the opposite side, adding, "But anyone will tell you, sir, Mr. Crimplesham's very well known hereabouts." "Oh, he's a good solicitor, I suppose," said Lord Peter. "Oh, yes, sir," said the waiter. "You couldn't do better than to trust Mr. Crimplesham, sir. As folks say, he's old-fashioned, but I'd rather have my little bits of business done by Mr. Crimplesham than by one of these fly-away young men.
Not but what Mr. Crimplesham I'll be retiring. Not but what Mr. Crimplesham will be retiring soon, sir. I don't doubt, for he must be close on 80, sir, if he's a day. But then there's young Mr. Wicks to carry on the business, and he's very nice, steady-like young man." "Is Mr. Crimplesham really as old as that?" said Lord Peter. "Dear me, he must be very active for his years. A friend of mine was doing business with him in town last week." "Wonderful active, sir," agreed the waiter. "And with his game leg, too. You'd be surprised. But there, sir, I often think when a man's once past a certain age, the older he grows, the tougher he gets, and women the same, or more so." "Very likely," said Lord Peter, calling up and dismissing the mental picture of a gentleman of 80 with a game leg carrying a dead body over the roof of a Battersea flat at midnight. "He's tough, sir. Tough as old Joey Bagstock, tough and devilishly sly," he added, thoughtlessly. "Indeed, sir," said the waiter. "I couldn't say, I'm sure." "I beg your pardon," said Lord Peter. "I was quoting poetry. Very silly of me. I got the habit at my mother's knee, and I can't break myself of it." "No, sir," said the waiter, pocketing a liberal tip. "Thank you very much, sir. You'll find that house easy. Just before you come to Penny Farthing Street, sir, about 2 turnings off on the right-hand side opposite." "Afraid that disposes of Crimplesham X," said Lord Peter. "I'm rather sorry. He was a fine, sinister figure, as I had pictured him. Still, his may yet be the brain behind the hands, the aged spider sitting invisible in the centre of the vibrating web, you know, Bunter." "Yes, my lord," said Bunter. They were walking up the street together. "He's going to win an apex? Nice, nice, nice. Oh, Command Quasar hooked us up with a follow. Thank you, thank you, thank you." "There is the office over the way," pursued Lord Peter. "I think, Bunter, you might step into this little shop and purchase a sporting paper, and if I do not emerge from the villain's lair, say within 3/4 of an hour, you may take such steps as your perspicuity may suggest." Mr. Bunter turned into the shop as desired, and Lord Peter walked across and rang the lawyer's bell with decision. "The truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth is my long suit here, I fancy," he murmured. And when the door was opened by a clerk, he delivered over his card with an unflinching air. He was ushered in immediately into a confidential-looking office, obviously furnished in the early years of Queen Victoria's reign, and never altered since. A lean, frail-looking old gentleman rose briskly from his chair as he entered and limped forward to meet them. "My dear sir," exclaimed the lawyer, "how extremely good of you to come in person. Indeed, I am ashamed to have given you so much trouble. I trust you were passing this way, and that my glasses have not put you to any great inconvenience. Pray take a seat, Lord Peter." He peered gratefully at the young man over a pince-nez, obviously the fellow of that now adorning a dossier in Scotland Yard. What was that sentence is weird. He peered gratefully at the young man over a pince-nez, obviously the fellow of... obviously a matching pair. Obviously the fellow of that now adorning a dossier in Scotland Yard. Okay. Man, they try to get so fancy. Okay. Lord Peter sat down. The lawyer sat down. Lord Peter picked up a glass paperweight from the desk and weighed it thoughtfully in his hand. Subconsciously he noted what an admirable set of fingerprints he was leaving upon it. He replaced it with precision on the exact center of a pile of letters. "It's quite all right," said Lord Peter. "I was here on business. Very happy to be of service to you. Very awkward to lose one's glasses, Mr. Crimplesham." "Oh, no, that's not... That's Lord... I'm getting all my characters muddled up. I've done that like 3 times today. Just got the wrong... Okay. Oh. All right, here, let's try this again. Yeah, well, you know, we all do the best we can there, Skip. We do the best we can with what we've got.
"It's quite all right," said Lord Peter. "I was here on business. Very happy to be of service to you. Very awkward to lose one's glasses, Mr. Crimplesham."
"Yes," said the lawyer. "I assure you I feel quite lost without them. I have this pair, but they do not fit my nose so well. Besides, that chain has a great sentimental value for me. I was terribly distressed on arriving at Balham to find that I had lost them. I made inquiries of the railway, but to no purpose. I feared that they had been stolen. There were such crowds at Victoria, and the carriage was packed with people all the way to Balham. Did you come across them in the train?"
"Well, no," said Lord Peter. "I found them in a rather unexpected place." Excuse me. "Do you mind telling me if you recognized any of your fellow travellers on that occasion?" The lawyer stared at him.
"Not a soul," he answered. "Why do you ask?"
"Well," said Lord Peter, "I thought perhaps the person with whom I found them might have taken them for a joke." The lawyer looked puzzled.
"Did the person claim to be an acquaintance of mine?" he inquired. "I know practically nobody in London, except the friend with whom I was staying in Balham, Dr. Philpotts, and I should be greatly surprised at his practising a jest upon me. He knew very well how distressed I was at the loss of the glasses. My business was to attend a meeting of shareholders in Medlicott's Bank, but the other gentlemen present were all personally unknown to me, and I cannot think of any of them would take so great a liberty. In any case," he added, "as the glasses are here, I will not inquire too closely into the matter of their restoration. I am deeply obliged to you for your trouble."
Lord Peter hesitated. "Pray forgive my seeming inquisitiveness," he said, "but I must ask you another question. It sounds rather melodramatic, I'm afraid, but it's this. Are you aware that you have any enemy, anyone, I mean, who would profit by your decease or disgrace?" Mr. Crimplesham sat frozen into stony surprise and disapproval.
"May I ask the meaning of this extraordinary question?" he inquired stiffly.
"Well," said Lord Peter, "the circumstances are a little unusual. You may recollect that my advertisement was addressed to the jeweller who sold the chain."
"That surprised me at the time," said Mr. Crimplesham, "but I begin to think that your advertisement and your behaviour are all of a piece."
"They are," Lord Peter said. "As a matter of fact, I did not expect the owner of the glasses to answer my advertisement. Mr. Crimplesham, you have no doubt read what the papers have to say about the Battersea Park mystery. Your glasses are the pair that was found on the body, and they are now in the possession of the police at Scotland Yard, as you may see by this." He placed the specification of the glasses and the official note before Crimplesham.
"Good God!"
exclaimed the lawyer. He glanced at the paper and then looked narrowly at Lord Peter.
"Are you yourself connected with the police?" he inquired.
"Not officially," said Lord Peter. "I am investigating the matter privately, in the interests of one of the parties." Mr. Crimplesham rose to his feet.
"My good man," he said, "this is a very imprudent attempt, but blackmail is an indictable offence, and I advise you to leave my office before you commit yourself."
He rang the bell. "I was afraid you'd take it like that," said Lord Peter. "It looks as though this ought to have been my friend Detective Parker's job after all." He laid Parker's card on the table beside the specification, and added, "If you should wish to see me again, Mr. Crimplesham, before tomorrow morning, you will find me at the Minster Hotel." Mr. Crimplesham disdained to reply further than to direct the clerk who entered to show this person out. In the entrance, Lord Peter brushed against a tall young man who was just coming in, and who stared at him with surprised recognition. His face, however, aroused no memories in Lord Peter's mind, and that baffled nobleman, calling out Bunter from the newspaper shop, departed to his hotel to get a trunk call through to Parker. Meanwhile, in the office, the meditations of the indignant Mr. Crimplesham were interrupted by the entrance of his junior partner. "I say," said the latter gentleman, "has somebody done something really wicked at last?
Whatever brings such a distinguished amateur of crime on our sober doorstep? I've been the victim of a vulgar attempt at blackmail, said the lawyer. An individual passing himself off as Lord Peter Wimsey. But that is Lord Peter Wimsey, said Mr. Wicks. There's no mistaking him. I saw him give evidence in the Attenbury Emerald case. He's a big little pot in his way, you know, and goes fishing with the head of Scotland Yard. Oh, dear, said Mr. Crimplesham. All righty. Hey, Ordained Pit. Hey there, Caden. Oh, we got a follow from Caden. No. Why is this? It takes 4-letter starts with P. Don't know. Fate arranged that the nerves of Mr. Crimplesham should be tried that afternoon. When, escorted by Mr. Wicks, he arrived at the Minster Hotel, he was informed by the porter that Lord Peter Wimsey had strolled out, mentioning that he thought of attending evensong. "But his man is here, sir," he added, "if you'd like to leave a message." Mr. Wicks thought on the whole it would be well to leave a message. Mr. Bunter, on inquiry, was found to be sitting by the telephone, waiting for a trunk call. As Mr. Wicks addressed him, the bell rang, and Mr. Bunter, politely excusing himself, took down the receiver. Hello, he said. Is that Mr. Parker? Oh, thanks. Exchange. Sorry. Can you put me through to Scotland Yard? Excuse me, gentlemen, keeping you waiting. Exchange. All right. Scotland Yard. Hello. Is that Scotland Yard? Is Detective Parker round there? Can I speak to him? I shall have done in a moment, gentlemen. Hello, is that you, Mr. Parker? Lord Peter would be much obliged if you could find it convenient to step down to Salisbury, sir. Oh, no, sir. He's in excellent health, sir. Just stepped round to hear evensong, sir. Oh, no, I think tomorrow morning would do excellently, sir. Thank you, sir. Uh-huh. Man, okay. This is a weird book. It's I mean, it's it's oh, excuse me. I don't believe I'm so tired. Yeah, it's certainly not taking itself very seriously. And I do get that feeling that it's more it was written more as fan fiction. I mean, it's like a lot of people do that way. You want a cause of death? There's no cause of death yet either. Oh, he had a big bruise on the back of his neck. Yeah, the only thing they found on him was there's a big bruise on the back of his neck. Now they don't know. They suspect he was like given the old karate chop from behind, but it has that's not been determined either. And they were kind of hinting that they're leaving open the possibility that maybe he got hanged or something like that. But though, I mean, yeah, I don't know. I don't know how detailed these books are. It's very unlikely, actually. A lot of these events which have been happening, very unlikely. You used to live near Salisbury? Uh-huh. Very good, very good, very good. That, however, boy, that's about all I got time for today. That is about it. So in the meantime, it's time to mosey. Yeah, I think that's about it. We're gonna continue with the book tomorrow. The sunshine's gone. The sun's out in here, looking nice, looking nice. I gotta go see if I can salvage my garden. It's not looking too good since I had to transplant it. There we go. Look at that. You like those? Like that new book club sticker? Yeah. But right about now, we've been reading for about 2 hours, 2 hours and change. So it's time to
It's time to say goodbye. Say goodbye for now. Yeah. We'll be back with some gaming later tonight. Yes, we will. Yeah, we're good. Very good. Very good. But in the meantime, we got to go. We got to go. And, oh, look at these. Mr. Skip there, talking up a storm. Good gracious. Look at all that. Yeah. Had a bunch of fine people come through. Very nice to get that host from Noble TV as well, in particular. Like them. Yeah, let's go through the Shadowtronics, Lady Death. Thank you for your fine cat herding. Jellybuns coming down with some nice embers. Thank you once again. Oregon, I think Oregon's almost always top of the spark list. Oregon throws them down like crazy, and everyone likes that new book club sticker. Yeah, I was thinking about having the word changed to instead of saying a sign saying book club, have it say hype. But I kind of like it like that. That's pretty sweet. I like that. Oh yeah, he's chit chatting like crazy. There we go. But there we go. That is that's all that they wrote. I'm trying to find an interesting person to here we got. Let's find a yeah, we're just going to host someone chill. What are they doing? Doing some painting? There you go. Yeah, he's drawing some okay, well, what about drawing realistically? That could be fun. Yeah, I'm just looking for a someone to host here real fast. Let's do this one. You got some nice looking drawing going on. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so I'm going to end the stream here. We'll be back later tonight in about 7 hours, actually. About 7 hours. Get some gaming on. It'll be fun. Have a great night, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. We'll continue.